morning, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all the ships at sea. For those of you who have been waiting for the last 120 seconds, we had a little technical difficulties in studios here, but the redoubtable Mr. Ash has put everything together with a little Gorilla Glue and so forth. So here we are, Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. That vaunted program is so highly rated to the Nielsen ratings, hosted by the two of the oldest aged radio personalities in captivity. The redoubtable Mrs. Busby to my right. We will start with the kudos again, if you will recall, Mr. Shuff, we always try to start with a kudo or two.
Sure.
And I guess the obvious one would be today, those folks who are stepping up and dressing up, a little warmer. Thank goodness it's not bitter cold. But the folks who ring the bells for the Salvation Army. And particular reference to some kids from Lincoln College who came out for us last week and was able to get a couple extra bucks out of the old man because they were kids from Lincoln College.
Right. They did a great job.
So that would be our kudo. Another kudo I would quickly make. Open Orange Group once again fed the public. They had their dinner last week, and feed them and they will come. The multitudes showed up, and so kudos to those folks at Open Arms. They do that annually. I thought I should go, and then again, no, let somebody who really is hungry do that, so I stayed away. I don't think that extra two spoons of beans would hurt anything, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a nice thing to going on here. Let's get right on to business here because we're running out of time.
Well,
do you have something to add?
We had.
Oh, wait a minute. We talk about this.
We had a little setback. Now, what do they call that in the big time?
This is
technical difficulty.
What do you mean in the big time? This is big time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that line. Anyway, here we are, and
cigarettes.
I wish that the spirit that we have beginning now, since tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and we all, my goodness, have plenty to be thankful for. And moving on into Christmas, if we could carry that spirit with us all year and do the decent thing, the thoughtful thing, wouldn't life be the berries?
It would be.
It would be.
It would be tremendous.
See if you can arrange that, Tony.
Yeah, I'll put in a word about that.
Do that.
This schedule's pretty busy.
Yeah. Well, especially now. Tony Shuff is the Salvation Army here, and he's brought with him an awfully cute little girl.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would buy that.
Her name is Rachel Oney, and she's just as friendly and sparkly, and they are representing the Lincoln Salvation Army today. And they brought their red kettles so that you know what it looks like. I can't imagine anyone in captivity.
Hold that up a minute, Rachel, for Mr. Ash to... Now, all of you folks out there in the radio airways, take particular look at this.
Yeah, we've got two today.
We have a
smaller one back here.
We have a big red kettle that you were used to in front of the stores, and we have a counter red kettle. That's a new addition. Is that a new addition to the Army this year?
No, we've had them for a while. I just, on other occasions, had failed to bring the small version. We have them in a few locations. Thornton's has been nice every year out on the interstate in Lincoln there to have two of them set up, and they do pretty well. The truckers and then the local patrons come through and throw in change and a few dollars sometimes. So we'll collect from there periodically. And
I know from experience how those things work because when I took the honor flights 10 years ago now, I was so enamored of the project, and still am today 10 years later, but I wanted to help. So I went to one of the stores and got little plastic containers, several of them, cut a hole in them, put a flag on them, and put a little note on them. And the folks were good, like at Thornton's and other fast food places, were good enough to let me put them around.
Right.
And in a year's time, I'd gotten over $2,000, nickels, dimes, and quarters.
Oh my goodness!
And once in a while, a $10 bill. Yeah.
Wow. That's tremendous.
So those counter point of interest and point of view, particularly truckers can be
Pretty generous.
pretty generous. And they see that and they'll drop another 5 or 10 in there.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
so good for you. So it's a neat little counter thing. Let's get down to serious business, Mrs.
Yeah,
Busby.
I don't think there's anybody in captivity who doesn't appreciate the Salvation Army and recognize the red kettles. I don't think we have to tout them too much. Anytime, why, if you bought a red scrub pail, you'd think you were scrubbing for the Salvation Army.
You would.
You have a new means of giving that I think is pretty crafty for you Americans.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah,
This
tell
is
them about
Let's
that.
talk about this texting to give.
Yes. Most smartphones, and maybe you don't even need a smartphone. I'm not enough techno savvy to know, but most people know that you can.
Any phone that can text, you can use this card or go online and just text Lincoln.
Lincoln doesn't have to be. It's not case sensitive. It doesn't have to be all in caps or.
Or lowercase.
Just go to text. And just send the word Lincoln.
Lincoln. That's
Now,
all.
what about these digits that are here, 91999, after you send it?
That's the number you send it to.
Okay. And so then you can make a pledge.
Correct.
It'll send you a text back, and it has a link sending, and you click on the link, and that will take you to their website. So it will say on there how much donations you want to give, whether it's another donation, 0 to whatever you'd like to give, 25 or above.
Oh, I just love you young people, the way you talk. All those words I know nothing about.
She's a lot smarter than I am on explaining the
They are smart.
technology.
Well, these little rugrats, they come to my house, and instead of sitting around, I just play with them and talk to them. They're busy looking at their little phones,
Yeah.
or just a little pad that they have with comics and so forth. So it's amazing today what goes on. So, Mr. Shuff,
Yes.
we're going to talk about the Salvation Army, but I just want to make a side, kind of a little commercial, if you please, if I get permission from Mr. Ash. Resilient cleaning services.
Oh yes.
I've seen some posts and so forth. Tell us just a little bit about that, because we're going to get to the Salvation Army, which is our subject for the day. But I just think
Thank you.
people
Sure.
like to know about what you did. It's an interesting sideline.
Well, back about 8 years ago at this time, the Salvation Army had tapped me to come on as the director here locally, and I said, well, it's going to have to be a marriage, hopefully made in heaven, because January of that year, prior to them coming to me in December, November, December, I'd started this business, Resilient Premier Cleaning, and just on my own. And now we have about a dozen of us working there in that time. And it is a cleaning service with various levels from residential to commercial. And we do clean outs, and we've done some large retail stores. We do the local Cracker Barrel concrete cleaning, so outside and inside cleaning, variety of things. We're doing flood restoration now. We've done some of that, and mold remediation, and various levels as we've branched out. And off air, we said, joked about all-nighters,
Yeah.
hoping I wasn't coming off an all-nighter. I used to pull too many of those, and with the extra staff now, I don't have to do quite as much
Yeah.
of that heavy lifting.
Well, that means that you have to go into a place of business at night, because you have to close it down for you to do your services.
Correct.
So you have to work all night to get the job done and have it ready to go the next morning when the place is supposed to be opened up.
Correct.
A lot of dedication, a lot of hard work. I've seen some of the results of your work. It's doggone good.
Thank you. We locally, before Aldi's opened up, we prepped for their grand opening at their new store, which is now 3 years ago or 4 years they've been open. The theater, when it was renovated, we were following everyone through that to get ready for their Christmas a couple of years ago. We didn't do all the painting and decorating, but we did.
No, right. The physical cleaning.
Get it all prepped and ready to go.
Well, you got to get it cleaned up before you do any painting and decorating.
Right. There were projects all the way through that for about 2 months in and out around all the work going on. So we tried to adapt to the client needs. So we have our pricing is standardized, but we then also have to tweak and customize what
Sure.
the client needs. So
Well, you do a nice job residentially, too. Gene and I had the experience when we moved out. We had to have that place. Boy, it took a lot of cleaning out. Anyway, we had Resilient Premier Services come in, and they did a very nice job, and it was not a whole lot of money to get the job done running right.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to mention that. Now, but here it is, the season to be giving.
It is.
Salvation Army. It's hard to believe it. Came out of the store the other day, and there they are ringing, and there's that little red kettle. I said, can't be. We just did that a year ago.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah.
Already
There we are.
again, as they say.
Boom.
So let's just talk about the Rachel. I remember when we had on the Kresge's corner. Kresge was the dime store, and on the courthouse square. And at Christmas time, we had a little small coterie of Salvation, very small Salvation Army, and you could walk around the corner, and they'd be in uniform, the ladies in their uniforms, little bonnets and so forth, and there'd be 2 or 3 instrumentalists playing Christmas music with the kettle there. Now that's a day or two ago. That's a Norman Rockwell time.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. No kidding.
Yeah, exactly. So my memory goes back that far. So now. This is 2018, and we've prepped things up a little bit. Fundraising is, of course, that's just paramount with you, or we won't have your services.
Correct.
So tell me where we are as far as.
Well, we've already.
Don't tell me. Tell both those listeners out there.
We've introduced Rachel Oney, who's been with the Salvation Army prior to coming to Lincoln. She was already working in Bloomington with the food pantry, but she can tell you more about what she's doing now. There's a program we have. Since the last time we were here, we've expanded exponentially in the work and the ministry and the programs locally to include her program and another program that I'll let her talk about too. That'll be of great interest to Mr. Gossett. But we'll
All
let
right.
Rachel explain.
Hit it, Rachel.
Sure thing. So we do have a couple new programs. My program's the Pathway of Hope program, and my title is the Regional Supportive Housing Case Manager. So I'm over 8 counties, not just Logan County, and what I do is do mostly case management, and I do that through Pathway of Hope. So it's a supportive housing program, and we work with those who either are homeless already or are at risk of becoming homeless.
Case management defines working with that category, and it can be singles or sometimes, unfortunately, families with children,
Yes.
little children.
Correct. Correct.
Which is the most difficult part of it.
Yeah.
Is working with trying to meet the needs of families who are really pretty desperate at the time you see them.
Rachel's able to do a little more hands-on on a more frequent basis with select cases that we can assist with. So it's not just the financial assistance, all that includes that. There's a lot of other things that she's able to supply and bring to the table.
You know, you have to walk a very fine line. You don't want to make them dependent upon you and the Salvation Army. On the other hand, if you're down and out and have little kids, you need somebody to step up to the plate and turn you in the right direction. So you got yourself quite a job there, kiddo.
Well, they've set up quite a few parameters to help us go through that process. Just going through a social work program in general, there's just like any doctor, they have a code of ethics to follow, and so do social workers. But also with the Pathway of Hope program, there's different assessments that we have that go through how hopeful a client is to their strength assessments. And that helps us get a clear idea of where their weaknesses are and where their strengths are, so that whatever they're doing well, we can continue to encourage them in that area. And then where they're having struggles with, then we can identify and cater their service plan and set goals specifically to that family or that individual. So we can kind of also assess as we go along. We try and assess again every 3 months after that, and even after they're out of the program, to see, are we actually doing what we set out to do? Are you more stable than when you came into the program? Do you have more hope to continue moving forward?
Do you run into a lot of problems with drugs and or alcohol? Is that the bottom line lots of times?
It can be. Substance abuse and domestic violence as well. They're really big problems, as well as just the cycle of poverty, growing up in it and not knowing how to get out, or having the tools, or knowing the resources.
There's what Groucho Marx said, the secret phrase, how to get out. That's the difficult thing for you. Judith, coincidentally, Judith and I were talking about addiction on the way up here visiting.
Sure.
Unless you've experienced it in your family, I don't think you really can have a grasp on what a vicious thing addiction, particularly with reference to alcohol now, but drugs, of course. I was early exposed to that by a family member, my mother's brother, and he'd call at 2 or 3 in the morning and want money. My dad's favorite guy, I can tell you that.
Oh, boy.
But, that was my early exposure to an addiction problem. My mother sat me down and talked to me about addiction. Well, I think most of it went over my head at that time.
Sure.
But it's very difficult to understand addiction. It's a terrible thing. And the Salvation Army is kind of on the front line, so to speak, because that's what happens with what you do.
Right.
How do you start with an addict who comes to you for help?
Well, specifically similar to what Rachel describes about a screening process, we help them. The two things that I also personally try and do when someone comes in, whether it's someone with an addiction problem or just anyone just needing any kind of help, even if it's just a handout. They may come in with one thing, but hopefully they'll leave with something beyond what they were asking for. And those two things that I try to do is help them locate where they really are and a little bit of how they got there. And that's hard to do in 5 minutes or maybe 10. But the two things I really challenge myself to do is help them locate them and him.
Yes.
And if I can do a them and him in a quick thing, and Rachel, we've seen each other kind of cut to the chase and said, okay, I understand, and then we'll just jump right, because people will deflect and lets things ricochet off them, and so we want to minister to the whole person. We can give them something tangible, but we want to help them walk out knowing, or at least a touch from him. So on the addiction cases, on the more severe things, we're not set up locally to do that, but we have a very good reference program system where within a radius of 40 miles, we have several locations that deal more specifically with that, that offer not only housing, but programs to help them walk out of or break those addictions.
We have an addiction here at WLCN. It's called an addiction to our sponsors.
Yes.
So at this point in time, we're going to yield a little bit to that addiction. Go right ahead, James.
Oh, we're back on you.
All right, back live in the air here, WLCN. The program is, what is the name of our program? Oh, yeah, Viewpoint. Judy and I have been doing this a couple of years now. I think really, Mrs. Busby, you and I are probably the oldest radio personalities on air in the country.
Yeah, that could be.
All right, our guests this morning is Tony Shuff and Rachel. How do you pronounce that last name, Derry?
Oney.
Oney.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Like we're only here.
Yeah, only here, right. Just here for a few minutes.
I'd like to ask a question. Well, I guess make an observation. As the decades have gone by for the two of us oldest people in the world here, you talk about having it be a two-pronged help. You have to help them here on earth
Right.
and help them with a faith. And
Definitely.
as the decades roll on, I find that your faith is needed just as much as it ever was, but in a different manner. And when I was young and raising kids, your faith and your church were such an integral part of your life because you're trying to teach them that they must be honest, they must be fair, they must be thoughtful, all these kinds of things. And here you've got a whole system to back you up in that. So it isn't just your silly old mother who's flapping her gums all the time. There's a whole system out there that's helping you by telling kids, actually, in that regard, your mom is right. You do have to be honest. You do have to be fair. And I should think that for these people, that's a real gift, showing them this.
Right.
Studies have kind of shown that having the spiritual aspect to, I guess, just your life in general gives you more hope and also a resilience factor. No matter what the faith is, with the Salvation Army, it's Christianity. But that's one key aspect to the Pathway of Hope program. We don't force people to meet with a pastor, but that's a question we ask, just so that it's, again, one more tool on a social services standpoint to give people that they have more of a support system. Now, it's not just your case manager, not just you and your family alone, but what are you going to do when you don't have the case management? So when you leave here, now you have a family of believers praying for you, that you have people that you can turn to. And then spiritually, there's that factor of being able to turn to God and pray for those other things.
You think Evangeline Booth had that in mind when she started this thing?
Yeah.
That's an amazing thing. What is the history? What year do you recall offhand? I don't mean to throw you a curveball,
No,
but it's a long time.
It's been
60 something, I want to say.
Right. It's been a couple years ago. And I don't recall if this was for here in America or from the origin back from William Booth in London. But we celebrated the 150th anniversary. So that's been a couple years back.
You've withstood the test of time, haven't you?
And, well, to explain more clearly, I've not been around quite that long. No. But we have stood the
That
test.
surprises me. Of course, people don't like to hear old people reminisce, but I do anyway, even on the air. I recall when we had in those days, the Salvation Army personnel were uniformed.
Yeah.
Right.
And of course, that's phased out now. And
We still have the uniform, but it's mostly for our officers.
Yeah, the officers are still uniformed. We're employed through or by the Salvation Army, but neither of us are officers. If we were, we would be sitting here.
But we're lucky.
In regalia.
Is the uniform still the same as it always was?
Pretty much. Yeah, I think there's been some minor changes, but
complete with good conduct medals.
I haven't seen them, but we're working
Tony,
on that. Trying to be a good
Well,
kid.
yeah, you got a little ways to go there, Tony.
Right, I sure do.
Tell us about your association with Salvation Army when you first came aboard here, and with specific reference to Lincoln.
Okay, of course, I've been a Lincoln resident more than half my life. Wasn't born and raised here, but moved here from Decatur Thanksgiving weekend of 1978, doing pastoral work, church work, so had been a Christian prior to that, involved in Christian ministry, and had done some missionary work and other things overseas. Had stepped away from active pastoring back about 2010, and then in that next year I started Resilient Cleaning, as we had mentioned before. for just different income, it was something that I was familiar with and knew because of taking care of everything in church work, took hands-on getting down and fixing, cleaning, and so that was an easy fix for me. But in that same year of 2011, then the Salvation Army lost their local director. Now, prior to that, they had also closed the thrift store that used to be there out in the Woodlawn Plaza, I guess they call it. That was established by the ARC program, Adult Rehabilitation Center out of Springfield, so that was a separate entity as just a thrift store. So where we're located has always been a service extension, not a thrift store, so we do the social service thing there on Kickapoo. And they had lost their director. The executive director from Peoria had come down and got a hold of the place where the Salvation Army banked, which was at then Logan County Bank. Talked to everyone there and said, we're looking for a new director. Anybody got any ideas? I mean, he just brought it up to the tellers and people on staff. And someone mentioned and knew that there was a local ministerial association. Somehow they found the number, called Larry Crawford of Open Arms, who was the acting president at that time, where were attending, and that call to the church plugged me in. The secretary very graciously said, yes, we know him. Can I have a number where we can have him call you if he so desires to, let me make that choice. So they called me up, said, there's somebody at Salvation Army who would like to speak with you. And I said, okay. And returned the call, and the first sentence was, hey, dude. Seriously, I remember it as clear as a bell. I think, who is this guy? He goes,
some street guy.
He goes, hey, dude, you want a job? And I went, hello? A second time. And he said, yeah, and he introduced himself. And he said, I'm down here. He said, there's no coffee in the place. Can you bring coffee? And I said, sure. He said, I'd like to talk to you. Sir, I'm serious about a job. And I said, okay. And so we met, and we talked for 4 hours right at that location, in that community room there. You walk in the door, where we are today. We sat to the side at a table. 2 other people came in to leave resumes. I guess they'd been trying to quickly put out word somewhere. There were already 2 others interested. And every time they would leave the paper, he'd turn and look at me, and he said, it's still yours if you want it. So I drug it out for 4 hours.
Interesting.
Because I said, look, I'd already started a business. And I said...
Got to have time for that.
And I played a little hardball, I guess. I said, you can't pay me what I'm worth. Well, which I knew they couldn't. I mean, not to be, uppity or anything, but just
like
to
you're
be...
getting the big bucks,
no, they streamlined. Kudos to Salvation Army, about 82 or 3 or 4, somewhere in the low to mid 80% of all revenue that comes in goes right into all these programs.
Yes.
For all the mailing and all the advertising and all the salaries.
And buying buckets.
And buckets and bells and everything. All the rest of that is that other wedge of whatever, 12% for something and the other 8 or something. I mean, they do it good. They do it right. And so they said, that's no problem. We can work with your schedule. And of course, sometimes it's cost me some all-nighters. But during the day, I'm there, in late afternoons and into the evening, I'll do Resilient. And now I have wonderful family members and other strong workers that are managing the Resilient side.
We're sitting here in this little small community, Lincoln, which, by the way, is not particularly growing. And we kind of take these particular charities that we have here for granted. We can't take them for granted because each one of them in their own right does a whale of a job in its own sphere. Anybody with a quick of reading ability and ability to remember specific instances in the communities where the Salvation Army steps up big time and does a whale of a job. And
they do.
There isn't, probably there isn't a day goes by that you might not have somebody at the back door, the front door there on Logan Street.
We can attest to that.
Well, it
always
proves that there's a need in Logan County because the Salvation Army wouldn't send Rachel here
Right.
if there wasn't a real need. If she could better spend her time in McLean County, Sangamon County, it shows that some of us live in peaceful ignorance, really.
That's what I'm told at home. Judy and I have a problem here on this station. We get so involved with our guests that we never forget to tell the people that 648-5510. Somebody might have a question or an experience. We'll keep names, protect the innocent. We'll keep the names off. Somebody might have an experience or have a serious question about Rachel or Tony. The Salvation Army, here we are at the time of giving. Gosh, it's rolled around again. Do you know what?
What?
I've had 95 Christmases. That's pretty hard for me.
Yes, you have. I was speaking to Rachel about that on the way in today. I said, I think we're at 95 now.
It just
Yes.
just
With our
shocks
good
me.
friend Bill.
It just shocks me to think of that. But
And I'm pushing my 80th, so we've been here, haven't we?
there's so much need out there, even today. I came up through the Depression years, so there was the obvious need then. Here we are in 2018, and there's still a great need for people to have help.
Yeah. It's great you mentioned your phone number for people to call with questions, and it sparked my thinking, and Rachel can help me out here too, to explain some of the questions maybe people already have that we've been hearing in the last month since the bell ringing has started. We did a flyer out to people who've given before, and it's clear enough, but yet it could be a question in people's mind, and it has to do with we've changed our mailing where our finances are processed, and it's only the process. So if someone gets a piece of mail from the Salvation Army, it might have a Chicago address on it where it's returned to. That's scaring people, thinking, I need to know my money stays here.
Yes.
Local.
So to answer that on air, it does stay local. It only goes there for processing. But through different ways, they're able to make sure it comes back, and it does. Because number one, I do know they check your zip code on your check, so it brings it right back here. They've just streamlined it so that they can save a nickel again. If it all is processed in one location for several counties, then there's just a handful of people, boom, that's their job, and it just right there. And then it goes to our account. So there's no worries about that. Almost every check I've received in the mail in the last month on the memo says Lincoln only or Logan County. To be used, literally every check. I went to the bank, I mailed off something the other day. I thought, every one of them, because people are concerned. So what that does, it makes for maybe fear in giving or being reticent about giving, so that everyone knows it does stay here.
That's an important point.
And one of the problems with these charities is, and we've all seen those charts where so much of it goes to overhead, and if you give somebody $250, $20 of that, it goes to the cause. The rest of it goes to overhead and salaries and so forth. Well, people don't like that, and they say, "Well, I want to give locally."
Right.
Yes.
And we all understand it, particularly here in a small community.
Sure.
That's the local becomes more important than in
Chicago.
Peoria County or Chicago.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it does, what's given here stays here. We make 3 promises. Rachel's heard this so much. We pinch every penny. We're going to stretch every dollar, but we're going to spend it all. Those are the 3
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Because it comes in and it gets applied throughout the year.
I'll ask you to repeat that.
the three promises I quickly make at the Red Kettle, just trying to
Sure.
think up one-liners. You got 5 seconds. I said, hey, I'll make you 3 promises, and they'll stop. And sometimes people turn and fold it up a second 20 when I've said that. So it's worked a couple times. And said, well, by golly, and they dig deep and pull out another 20. I said, I'll make you 3 promises. We're going to pinch every penny, but we're going to stretch every dollar, and on top of that, we're going to spend it all. And so when I say that, it's like, by golly, you probably will. I'll bet you need another 5, 10, 20. So they do that.
Rachel, how long have you been with us in Lincoln here?
I've been in Lincoln. We were actually talking about this on the way over. 4 years in Lincoln.
Really?
5 years in Illinois.
She's been hiding her light under a bushel because nobody's seen her on the courthouse square ringing.
Not yet.
Not yet.
By the way, those, as I said at the opening of the program, sometimes those volunteers kind of experience a little tough weather out there, standing in front of the stores and so forth.
Right.
And some of the stores will let you into the vestibules, and some don't. That's their business. But the people who stand there and ring that bell, God love them.
Oh, no kidding. They're invaluable.
Now, do you have a kind of a goal, not a budget per se, but a goal that you'd like to see come out of the kettles?
We do. Thanks for asking. $30,000 is the goal we had last year. We'll keep it for this year. We broke it by $18 last year.
Is that right?
30,000, 18.
Listen, that's a lot of money in
And it came
nickels, dimes, and
from forgetting we
dollar
had
bills.
these 2 kettles out, the counter kettles out at Thornton's. We were short about $4 or $5. I thought, oh, we were so close. And then one of the volunteer kettle counters said, oh, did we ever get those from out at Thornton's? I said, no, we didn't. Went out there and it was enough
be
to
darned.
give us
Yeah.
the over. So there's, if I might say, I know we're short on time. We have a whole new program, and I said earlier you'd be very interested in this. It's a grant per diem is what it's called, and some of the terminology is a bridge bed program for homeless veterans,
Yes.
sir. And we are going to, hopefully by Christmas, I don't want to go out too far on a limb, and we've not done anything publicly about this other than personally to a few people, but we will publicly say that grant per diem is so that we can house up to 11 veterans.
And that's 11 veterans, 11 veterans here in Lincoln. But we also are partnering with the Salvation Army in Bloomington, and they have another 9 beds. So it's a total of 20 beds, and that is for not just Logan or McLean County, but the surrounding area.
Okay, so if you live in Morgan County, you could come to Lincoln or to Bloomington, is that right?
You could, yes.
If you were a veteran, of course.
If you were a veteran. It's a short program. Again, that one's 90 days or less. So it is a transitional bridge bed program. It's another term for that would be rapid rehousing. So when you come into the program, it's a strict screening process, and you have to really meet those requirements in order to get in, but they are looking to house you permanently afterwards. So unless we think we can house you permanently after those 90 days, we'll find another program for you to qualify
Specifically,
for.
do we have a homeless veteran that you're aware of in Logan County?
Currently,
You're
we
both
have,
shaking your heads. My.
before the program is even fully opened, we already have all the 20 beds that we can fill now. We are just working, making sure.
They're waiting on us.
They are
It's just
waiting to
wrong.
make sure we open the
Yeah.
program.
I'm having a fire plumber come in the next few days, right after Thanksgiving, and adjust sprinkler heads. There's one room that
Really?
modifications, some automatic
to.
door closer here, a little.
Have to make sure everything's up to date.
Got everything up and running, and boom, they're going to show up. So likely between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
You're here in Logan County, and you spoke of several. Multiply that. And,
Right.
here we are down there in the border fighting that terrible problem. It's just a mess. Somehow, the priorities just get mixed up.
Understand.
Veterans, homeless veterans is
It's a
terrible
huge,
thing.
no,
Homeless, period.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Period.
But someone who served their country, often not just that they worked at a desk, but literally put themselves in harm's way repeatedly and suffer these difficulties.
Some of it's PTSD.
So, oh, yes.
Probably a lot of it.
Yeah.
There again.
Very
that's,
much so.
That's like an addiction. How do you define that? It's not the person's fault.
That's true.
Yeah. We've run out of time. Judy, you go ahead,
Now,
please.
a bridge bed is 90 days.
Yes.
It is.
And in the event that they need more, you can search that out.
Yes, we
Yes.
will already have in place, whether it be SSVF or another, like VASH housing, that there's Section 8 housing for veterans. We will have a program for them to enter into before they leave our program.
You know, one thing I think that people think of the Salvation Army is one of your promises, Tony, and that is that you'll spend it all, but you'll squeeze every nickel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We do.
we really expect and accept the fact that the Salvation Army gets more bang for its buck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's-
stories we've heard. Someone at the Red Kettle told a story to one of our Red Kettle workers just yesterday, and when they got in the vehicle, they said, "I got to tell you this story." Someone that dated back to World War I that just bragged on the help that her grandmother got and said,
Think of
"Before
that.
I die, make sure that you, in your lifetime, every chance you get it to go to a Red Kettle or in any way help the Salvation Army, please promise me that you will do that." That's a story I heard yesterday.
Yes.
Bag for the buck.
Bang for the buck.
And locally, I can't think of a better charity or a better cause than the Salvation Army. Here we are, Thanksgiving tomorrow. I always try to close with a quote that I found, and I found this is, you might find this a little difficult to remember, Judith K. Willie Nelson.
Oh, boy.
Willie Nelson said, "When I started counting my blessings, my world changed forever."
There it
An
is.
interesting comment by a man who's been around the block a day or two.
Yeah.
Rachel, Tony, thank you very much for spending your morning with us.
God
I'm
bless
sorry
you
we ran
both.
out of time. We could go a little bit further.
We
Well,
could.
thank you
Good
for
luck
having
to you
us.
and Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas,
And you.
Happy